Alex was seated at one end of the room with Tonic barking at the other. Suddenly, the dog stopped his barking, as if exhausted with having to defend himself. So, Alex asked Tonic, "Is that it?" knowing that this was Tonic's method of protecting himself. Soon, Alex would know that Tonic was the dog for him. After their 18 years together, Alex returned to the shelter where he first met his loyal dog with a plan in mind. This visit wouldn't have been possible without the support of a stranger and the love and loyalty of his old terrier. Tonic, like many dogs, was brought to an animal shelter shortly after he was born. A small, black terrier, he was separated from his mother and siblings for unknown reasons. But he could never imagine what his future would hold. While he was in the shelter, Tonic was afraid. As a small dog who was new to the world, the shelter had many scary sights and sounds that the young dog wasn't prepared for. He spent his first experience in the shelter afraid for his life, unlikely that he would ever find a home. A few months into his life, Tonic was adopted. This is the best hope for any shelter dog, but sadly, this wouldn't be the end of his adoption journey. After a few months, Tonic was brought back to the shelter by his new owner to meet his fate again because the dog didn't get along with the owner's young children. Would anyone adopt this cute but skittish dog? During Tonic's second stay at the same animal shelter in Burbank, California, several things about him became apparent to the people looking after him. One was that he did not get along with other dogs or any other animals. And the second was that he did not get along with children. With these rules, it became more unlikely that anyone would ever adopt Tonic. Spending his first 9 months of life in an animal shelter was very difficult for this dog. He was sweet with the workers at the shelter, but when potential new owners came to the shelter to meet Tonic, he barked and nipped at them. Would his anger be too much for any hopeful dog owner to overlook? One day, a potential owner for Tonic came into the shelter to find a dog to adopt. Alex met with many dogs at the shelter and he was specifically looking for a dog with personality. Many dog owners have an idea in mind of the breed or size of dog they are looking for, but most of the time the perfect dog comes to you by complete surprise. Tonic barked and barked at the top of his lungs the moment Alex passed by his cage. Alex had already visited 2 shelters on his search for a dog and it seemed apparent that Tonic had no interest in him. It was clear that Tonic wasn't a friendly dog, at least, at the moment, and that he was scared of the people around him. But what happened next surprised everyone in the room. The shelter owner asked Alex if he had kids or other pets. He answered, no, so she knew that he could be a great potential owner for this shy, but sweet dog who so desperately needed a loving home. Alex was seated at one end of the room with Tonic barking at the other. Suddenly, the dog stopped his barking, as if exhausted with having to defend himself. So, Alex asked Tonic, "Is that it?" knowing that this was Tonic's method of defending and protecting himself. Soon, Alex would know that Tonic was the dog for him. After Tonic stopped barking and heard Alex's question, he did something surprising. He then bent his hind legs and got on all fours on the ground. Tonic then proceeded to crawl the length of the room to where Alex sat. When he reached him, Tonic crawled into his lap and laid his head on Alex's leg, falling asleep, as he would come to do for many, many years. When it was apparent that Tonic had let down his guard for someone for perhaps the first time in his life, the shelter worker who had been looking after him simply told Alex, "I guess you have a dog now." If this shelter worker hadn't recommended to Alex that he meet this dog after meeting many others, he and Tonic may both have very different lives today. When Alex brought Tonic home, he was still a bit skittish and afraid, as was to be expected of the dog who spent most of his first 9 months in a loud and chaotic shelter, never knowing if his new home would be permanent. Alex knew that his aggression came from fear and loneliness, so he was patient with his new pup. After 18 happy years together, Tonic was still in his prime, with twice the energy of other dogs his age. Except for a few gray spots, Tonic had hardly aged in his decades with his owner. His skittish nature soon faded into a kind and gentle nature. He even enjoyed being covered with stickers on his thick fur, which were always removed gently. The loyalty Tonic showed to Alex made him fondly look back to their meeting often, and soon, they would both have the chance to revisit that animal shelter. One day, a stray cat wandered under the fence of Alex's California home. He was hungry, yet friendly, but sadly without a tag. Alex could tell immediately that this cat was a house cat, not used to wandering the streets. So, he fed the cat and began a search for its owner, without a clue where this search would lead. When the owner of the cat was found, Alex was offered a reward. He tried to turn it down, but the owner insisted that the person who found his beloved cat should be rewarded. Alex had only one use in mind for this money: giving it back to the community of rescued animals that brought his beloved terrier into his life. He called his local shelter, which they said was desperately in need of beds, warm blankets and towels. When he received the reward, Alex went shopping to pick up supplies and treats to bring to the shelter where he found his dog, Tonic, all of those years ago. But he never would have guessed Tonic's reaction to returning to his old stomping ground. The 18-year-old dog immediately knew that the shelter was not a place he wanted to return to. Tonic tugged on his leash outside the shelter, showing his owner that he wanted to stay outside. So, Alex carried the old dog into the shelter to meet his fellow dogs, knowing that Tonic wouldn't ever have to be left in a shelter again. Although Tonic was nervous while entering the shelter, as long as he stayed by Alex's side, he didn't show any signs of fear. He followed his owner while he passed out supplies and treats to all of the cats, dogs and other animals in the shelter. But he wanted to see how one area of the shelter had changed in the last 2 decades: the dog cages where he first met Tonic. The last stop on their tour of the shelter was the dog cages where Alex first met Tonic and immediately fell in love with him. The shelter was loud with barking dogs and Tonic noticeably had fear in his eyes as the two walked through the shelter in total safety. Then, they found the exact cage the dog was in all of those years ago. When they found the cage in which Alex had met Tonic for the first time, he got tears in his eyes. But what was truly surprising was Tonic's reaction. Just as he had done 18 years ago, Tonic walked his way over to his owner, still happy to be in his care. These two were truly meant to be together, that is undeniable. The shelter workers in Burbank were happy to receive the donations that were made possible by Alex and the owner of Meow the cat. Shelters across America need these supplies to be able to take care of all of the animals that come in and out of these shelters. Alex had this message to share: please don't buy pets from stores, visit and donate to a shelter near you. This trip to the shelter where Alex first met his dog 18 years ago reminded them both of how lucky they were to have been brought together. Without the great work that this shelter does in taking care of stray animals, many owners would be without their trusted partners in life. Tonic's longevity wouldn't be possible without the shelter workers who took care of him and continued to push for hopeful owners to adopt him, even after he proved himself to be a nervous dog. Alex credits a steady diet of raw, organic ground turkey as the secret to Tonic's health. At 18 years old, he can still leap 2 feet off of the ground. If you enjoyed this story, wait for our next story starting in 10 seconds. When Victoria Aspinall married her husband Damien, she learned that she had to share his heart with his animals. But then he took her to Gabon, Central Africa, to introduce her to 2 gorillas he had raised and released into the wild. And despite his warning, she got dangerously close, and that's when the unexpected happened. In 1957, Damien Aspinall's father, John Aspinall, founded the Howlett's Wild Animal Park. So, Aspinall spent his childhood inside the 700-acre estate in Kent, England. In fact, Aspinall claims that a surrogate gorilla mother helped him climb down from a tree he was stuck in. It's too bad she wasn't around when his wife got dangerously close to a gorilla years later. The Howlett's Wild Animal Park organization provides a safe haven for gorillas. They also ensure the survival of the species by reintroducing bred gorillas back into the wild at the Plateau Buteke National Park in Gabon, Central Africa. When Aspinall's father passed away, he continued the legacy, but was it a mistake he would live to regret? As a child, Aspinall was a loner among his own kind, but he was definitely popular with wild animals. I've always felt disconnected, and humans inevitably let you down, animals never do. There's more of an honesty and purity there, Aspinall told Daily Mail. He never imagined his love for animals would put the love of his life in danger. The organization had several projects that involved releasing animals back into the wild, which is how Aspinall ended up raising numerous baby gorillas. He was so proud of the bond they shared that he even felt like a surrogate father. But there were 2 male gorillas called Jalta and Ema that really stole his heart. Both of the gorillas were planned to be moved back into the wild in a protected habitat, he told Daily Mail, and soon enough, his furry friends were released back to where they belonged. But he had no idea that a tense family reunion was in the cards. In August 2016, Aspinall married Victoria Fisher in Tuscany, Italy. She quickly learned that marrying her conservationist husband meant she also married his animals. Fisher wound up hanging out with gorillas, playing croquet with abandoned anteaters, and howling at wolves at the park. "It might sound crazy, but I genuinely love the wolves as if they were my own children," she told Daily Mail. But how Aspinall and Fisher met was actually quite an interesting story. Fisher had no idea who Aspinall was when she agreed to go out on a date with him. "He asked me for lunch the same week we met, and normally I would have said no," she explained. "But I found him intriguing. He's one of those guys who captures your attention immediately." She might have changed her mind if she had known what fate had in store for her, though. Fisher was a city slicker and a management consultant with a master's degree in chemistry. She was also a business executive. So, spending a lot of time with wild animals wasn't something she ever imagined for her future. But destiny had put her on a perilous path. She just didn't know it yet. Jalta and Ema said goodbye to the man who raised them in 2003. But by June 2017, Aspinall was eager to find out more about their whereabouts. It wasn't the first time he had gone on a mission to find them since they had been released into the wild. But this time, he brought his wife along. And he warned her there was danger ahead. Aspinall spent a lot of time bonding with Jalta and Ema while they were living at Howlett's Wild Animal Park. He wondered if they would still remember him, but he feared that living in the wild for too long would cause them to react differently, especially around his wife. Adult gorillas are strong and potentially dangerous. He didn't know how his wife's presence would affect them. But they flew to Gabon with a team of animal experts to find Jalta and Ema anyway. They just didn't know that the creatures were lurking deep in the woods and waiting to come out. The couple hiked across a challenging terrain and journeyed down the jungle's river on a boat. Thankfully, Jalta and Ema were tagged with GPS locators. But the team had already spent hours searching for them and they were nowhere to be found. But Fisher's date with danger wasn't cancelled yet. The jungle was dense, so the team used drones that relayed footage to Aspinall's phone. And eventually, they were able to find the gorillas. But would they welcome him and his wife with open arms, or would they attack? The drones lured the gorillas out of hiding. The creatures made their way to the river bank, which was the perfect spot for Aspinall and the team to approach with their boat. But they hadn't seen a human in years. He couldn't help but fear they would attack without provocation, but he still wanted to get as close as possible. Jalta and Ema spotted the boat carrying Aspinall's team. The gorillas appeared intrigued, but everyone knew that a wild animal's behavior could change quickly. And that's just what the couple discovered firsthand. Aspinall feared the boat's motor would startle the gorillas, so he exited and walked across the river. When he arrived on the shore, he laid low on the ground so he wouldn't appear threatening by standing up. Then he heard them make a sound similar to a gurgle or a grunt and it shook him to the core. Fisher stepped into waist-high waters and approached the river bank. "I decided to gently ease my way ashore. I didn't want to frighten them and I wanted to make sure that they were relaxed," she told Daily Mail. But things didn't go quite the way they had expected. He instructed his wife to stay still once she was a few feet from shore. He waited nervously to see if the gorillas would react aggressively. Then they made a friendly gurgling sound towards her. So, he told her to approach the rest of the way, but was his decision too rash? Suddenly, one of the gorillas nuzzled her with his face. It was a sign they had accepted her. Then, both gorillas welcomed her with open arms. After bonding for a bit, it was time for Aspinall and Fisher to leave. But this wasn't the last time they would see the gorillas. The Aspinalls returned the next day and found the gorillas in the same spot. Ema rushed towards Fisher, made some happy noises and then hugged her. But then, something else happened that really took her breath away. Ema took Fisher's hat, gave it a sniff, and then placed it on his head. The adorable exchange was captured on film and uploaded on YouTube. The video was viewed over 21 million times and got 163,000 likes. But one wrong move could have turned this into a tragedy. Gorillas tend to shy away from humans, but they won't think twice about using their strength against a threat. One wrong move is all it takes to provoke a gorilla. Even a harmless body movement can be perceived as an aggressive posture. But was the threat really over? A misunderstanding between a human and a gorilla could cause the animal to aggressively roar or react with a bluff charge, which is when a gorilla charges at someone and then stops a meter from its target. There are a lot of things that could have gone wrong with Fisher's introduction. Had Fisher been startled and attempted to run away, the gorillas would have run after her. Gorillas are fast on their feet and can catch up to a human. Once caught, the animal may bite the first body part it sees. But did Fisher leave the island in one piece? Fisher's introduction went really well, which is one of the reasons why she's continuing to work along her husband to restore ecosystems damaged by humans. That way, animals like Jalta and Ema can thrive. But her newfound love for primates wasn't limited to these two gorillas. Fisher's experience with Jalta and Ema allowed her to feel closer to other primates. On Instagram, Aspinall posted a photo of his wife hanging with a baby baboon named Gelada, who enjoyed her piggyback ride and pulling on Fisher's long blonde hair.